The new MotoGP game, MotoGP 19, is released now. It's out on the shelves, and Tom Errington and I have been lucky enough to play the game, so we're going to have a little chat about everything you need to know about this game. And Tom, there's one place where I think we have to start, because this is the thing that the producers of the game have really been pushing, and that is neural AI. Now that's what they're calling it, not what we call it. But AI is always a big topic in racing games, can be very difficult to get it right. What have Milestone done this time with MotoGP 19?
Yeah, I mean, neural AI sounds like something Skynet would produce, but it's kind of a little bit like that. It's a medical company primarily, and a scientific company that has this AI that they've used over a very long time, developed it. And for the first time ever, this company, Aerobics, has worked with Milestone to create an AI for the game. And the difference to this one is it's not an AI that has been programmed to do a certain thing in this certain situation or react to the player. The player makes a difference to the AI. In this case, they drop a rider in the game and they give it no instructions whatsoever, so it goes off and learns. So the video I got showed was very funny around Austin, where it was jump starting, struggling, wobbling, hitting walls and all sorts. And every time it did something, they would give it, say, a -10 for that's not what you should do, +10 if that's what you should do. And over the time, through many, many simulations, I was told numbers like 30,000, 50,000 times, it would get better and more intelligent. And eventually you'd go from that shaky, struggling to stay on a bike to a great racing line, high speed, and being really competitive. And then because you can't really predict what it's going to be like in a pack race, they would make the race start at different corners at each track, so it would get an idea of what it would be like if 20 riders went through this corner, how it should behave, how it should react. And we both said it, and when we've played it so far, you can really notice how different that AI feels compared to any other racing game, really. So
it's not about really the AI learning how to race you as the human player. The AI is doing its own thing, and it just so happens that you end up on track with them as if, effectively, you're racing a bunch of real-world opponents.
Yeah, it's very much the realistic thing of if you were to start riding a powerful bike today, you'd be terrible at first, you'd learn to get better and better, and you'd learn independently, and then try and apply that in real situations that arise to you. It's very much authentic.
Now that's the big selling point, I think, of this game, and it has been interesting to play it so far and see that to have AI that's fallible is very interesting. They do make interesting overtaking manoeuvres, but they also make interesting mistakes. So that's all good fun. And another positive I think we should highlight about the game is the amount of depth that's now being built. Milestone have had this license for a while now. They release a version every single year, as you'd expect, but they keep piling on extra bits, and that can be quite challenging with effectively a single series game. Like you've only got the MotoGP license, but they've been able to build in extra modes and bring in a lot of historic content as well now. So this is really building up into a much wider game than just playing the 2019 season.
Yeah, I mean, straight off the bat, you've got Moto E added in this time, which is a very, very different experience. I've been told it's a much heavier bike, totally different way to ride. You've then got the traditional Red Bull Rookies Cup all the way up to MotoGP, so you've got that wide variety there. But there was a real push this year to get historics in as well, and that includes having 3 tracks that aren't current MotoGP tracks that have been recreated very faithfully in Donington Park, for example. And there's a real desire there to have a full-rounded experience, and they've listened to the community as well. They found out that for all they've been presenting this career ladder for so many years, and you start at the bottom and work your way up, they found that there were people who wanted to just jump in and get on a MotoGP bike straight away. So not only have they got that depth now, but they've also got the flexibility where the player can get what they want out of it.
And what I find fascinating is actually, I think they said there's something like 50 different bikes in the historic section. You can do a race of roughly about 10 two-strokes from a much further back in history, mainly from the 90s. And then they've got loads of the 4-stroke era now. And when you go through that menu, there might be sort of 8 or 9 Valentino Rossi bikes in there. But when you do the race, there'll only be one Rossi in the race with you, and you've still got a grid of over 20 historic bikes. And I think the racing in the 4-stroke historic class was my favourite, I think, when I played the game.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of racing games, you have sort of the historic elements. You see it in games like Forza, you'll just get the historic car recreated. Even in the F1 game, you get the historic cars, but we've talked before about there's not really the flexibility you'd quite like to have that faithful recreation of the era. But in this case, it comes down to even at the menu where you've got clips from the actual live event of the time, the riders' overalls perfectly replicated, and then you're going straight into an experience which feels authentic and like you really are a part of the history. And that, for me, is one of the biggest successes in this game.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned the footage there, because there's something like 20, 30, 40 challenges where you can recreate a moment from history. and they show you the footage, and then you've got to go and do it on the track. But you can also just have a championship with a load of old 4-stroke or 2-stroke bikes. Now, I said that the old 4-strokes, brilliant to race, great fun, of course, with the intelligent AI that we've been talking about, but they handle nicely as well. One of the things I think you have to talk about when you talk about any new bike racing game is the handling of the bikes. Of course, the main thing we're interested in is the big MotoGP class. That's been a challenge for a long time now, I think. I think we haven't had great handling for a MotoGP or a World Superbike game or anything like that for quite a while. Where do you think Milestone have got to this time with the handling in 2019?
I think there's been some progress, but we're still a level away from where you jump on it and it rides how you would imagine a MotoGP bike to ride. Because obviously we haven't ridden a MotoGP bike. When you watch them on TV, it's the nimbleness, the quick changes, direction, all these sort of things. Doesn't feel like you can really do that in the controller. For example, I had quite a few goes at Mugello going through sort of the high speed section stuff like that, and I found it was always really difficult to get it to turn at high speed comfortably, where you weren't either going too far and falling off the bike, or you just weren't getting the steering at the right speeds. And I was trying lots of different approaches. I never quite got an approach that felt comfortable. You could get a nice flowing lap together, and they put a big push behind graphics and a physics update for this one. And you see some products of it that work really well, like you mentioned when you're riding around of a bike, sometimes you'll see them where if they're going a little too hot into a corner, you'll see the bike getting out of shape and how they try and stay on. And those are really nice touches. But in terms of you yourself riding the bike, I still think there's a way to go to improve that.
Yeah, I think the main weakness they still have is on the approach to the corner entry. There's no feel on the brakes, there's no feel of what the front wheel's doing. Once you're into the corner, you've got to concentrate really hard. We both said this, didn't we? You almost come away from the game with a headache. You've got to concentrate. Yeah, but that's because the bike dynamics and the rider dynamics, you can really see everything's going on in the middle of the corner, and coming out of the corner, you can do a lot with the throttle to control it, and you can feel when the bike's going to go away. But it just feels like on the brakes, if you miss your braking point by a couple of metres, you're sailing past the corner and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and the other way I found, if I was being too conservative, I'd brake and everyone would fly past me. And then, like you say, because you can be a bit more in control coming out the corner, I'd find I'd lose 5 places going in, but on the exit, I'd gain 6 or 7 because I was able to really control that. But it's just very frustrating when you make all those places and at each slightly tricky corner, you're going into it knowing that you're not going to get the perfect ideal line out of it. You're going to have to sacrifice momentum in a few places and try and get it back on the exit or on the straights. And okay, great, you've got that to and fro battle, but at the same time, you never feel like you're going to get the consistency, and it really shows up in qualifying, I find, where you just can't really set a time that's right up there. Because one of the consequences of the AI this year is that by having it done the way they have, is to find that the lap times are much closer to real life as well. But I just find that I could never get anywhere quite near that.
Yeah, it's made it very difficult, and that's actually great for the experienced players. Absolutely. I think this is going to be the best game they've had in a long time, because the AI is going to be much more challenging. The bike physics are definitely more difficult. For players with less experience, I think you're right that a lot of people don't know what a motorbike would feel like to ride around a circuit, but I tried it with and without the rider age just to see what the difference is like, and they do a lot of the work for you with the rider aids. I'd say the only bit that feels a little bit clunky is that if you're about to tuck the front on the brakes into a corner, it kind of stands the bike up for you and almost brings you to a stop, but largely it's helping you out. And I think you're right that one of the key weaknesses you highlighted, Mugello is a perfect circuit for it, because fast direction change is something that MotoGP bikes are all about these days, and you just can't really do that. If you go into a right-left around Mugello, you can get the right perfect, but trying to switch back over, I've used steering wheel instead of handlebars, trying to switch back over to the left, you're just always going to run wide and you can't bring it back. And I think they've got some work to do there, but this is definitely a big step. So what would be our verdict then on this game? I feel like it is a good step from 2018, but is it enough of a step, Tom?
I think so. One of the big things with racing games generally is sort of the replayability, where you get the novelty of having the game, you'll play it a lot for maybe a week or so, and then you'll step away and find something else, and there's not really an incentive to go back, when especially a lot of official license games tend to be, here's the season, here's a couple of add-ons. But with this having the full package in a career mode, you've got Moto, you've got really engaging historic modes. We haven't even heard about what the esports offering is going to be this year as well. There's a lot to keep people really invested in this game right up until the next release, and if you're going to be a yearly franchise, that's exactly what you want.